All right, so let's talk about a coordinate plane. So there are a few things that we need to know to be able to read any coordinate plane. Those three things are, we have something called the x-axis, which runs horizontal from left to right. So on any graph that we look at, the x is always going to go from left to right. And then we have our y-axis that runs vertically, so it runs up and down. And again, on any graph that you look at, x will go from left to right, y will go from up and down. And then we have something that's called the origin. And the origin is where our x and our y-axis intersect. And on any graph, they're going to intersect at the same spot. And that spot is called 0, 0. So on this graph, it happens to be right here. So again, at 0, 0. But depending on the way that your graph is numbered, the way that it's labeled, that 0, 0 could be in a different spot, just again, depending on the viewpoint that that graph gives you. But it's always going to be the same, what we call coordinate pair or ordered pair of 0, 0. So coordinate pairs, also called ordered pairs, names a specific location on a coordinate grid. So it's like if you've ever played the game Battleship before, when you're guessing for someone's ship location, you always give a number and a letter, like C5 or K10. You're basically talking about an ordered pair, except for in math, our coordinate grids, our ordered pairs, they don't involve letters, it's strictly numbers. So that x and that y-axis are where we get our ordered pairs from. So in an ordered pair, you're always going to keep those in parentheses, and there's always going to be a comma that separates your two coordinates. And it's always going to go x coordinate first, y coordinate second. So think about in the alphabet, x has to come before y. So in our ordered pair, x has to go before y as well. Now, when we look at our coordinate grid, it's broken up into 4 different sections. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Those 4 different sections are what we call quadrants. So quadrant. Okay, so again, that prefix quad means 4. So again, 4 quadrants. So I always like to joke that it's easy to see the order of our quadrants because when we number them, we go counterclockwise and it ends up looking like the letter C. So this in the top right is quadrant number 1, and we use Roman numerals to write our quadrants. So quadrant 1. Then again, if I see the correct order, our next quadrant that we hit is quadrant number 2. Following our C, then we would hit quadrant number 3. And finishing out our C is quadrant 4. Now, each quadrant has some specific characteristics that make it easy to identify the points that live and exist in that quadrant. So we're going to start with quadrant 1. I'm going to open it up a little bit, but I'm also going to use my sticky notes to cover up everything except for quadrant 1. Let me get my sticky notes out and ready. Okay. And just to kind of add some notes here, I'm going to go ahead and put my parentheses and my comma on each of them because we're going to look at what are the characteristics of each of our quadrants. Okay, so again, starting with quadrant 1. So when I look at my x-axis, so again, my x-axis is running from side to side. All of my x values in quadrant 1 are positive numbers. So I will always have a positive x in quadrant 1. When I look at my y values, they're also all positive numbers. So any ordered pair, any point that lives in quadrant 1 has to have a positive x and a positive y. So let's say, for example, we're going to create point A. And I'm going to tell you that point A is at the ordered pair 3, 4. So when I go to plot a point on my graph, I always want to start at the origin. I just realized I covered up 0. So I want to start at the point 0, 0. There we go. So if I start here, If I have a positive x value, that tells me that I am going to be moving to the right. So I always start with the x. So if I have positive 3, that means I'm going to move to the right 3 spaces. So 1, 2, 3. So then if I have a positive y, that tells me from whatever x location I'm at, then I'm going to move up that many spaces. So if I move to the right 3, now I need to move up 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I put a dot on that location. And I'm going to use a letter A to signify that that is point A. So again, a positive x, you move to the right. A positive y, you move up. That lives and exists inside of quadrant 1. So let's look at quadrant 2. So I'm going to adjust my sticky notes. All right. So when I look at quadrant 2, again, my ordered pair is going to start with that x coordinate. So when I look at my x-axis, which again is running from side to side, this time I notice all of my x coordinates, all of my x options are negative numbers. So I have a negative x, but when I look at my y-axis, they're all still positive. So in quadrant 2, we have ordered pairs that have a value of negative x, positive y. So that negative x tells you you're going to start at the origin and move left. And then the positive y, again, tells you you're moving up from that x location. So I'm going to say that this is point B. And point B is at the ordered pair, negative 5, 1. So again, I'm going to start at my origin, and that negative 5 tells me I'm moving to the left 5 spaces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then my y value of positive 1 tells me to move up 1 space. So I'm going to put a dot on that location and label it point B. Moving on to quadrant number 3. And let me cover up everything. All right. So in quadrant number 3, if I look at my x-axis, I still have negative x values, which means I'm going to start at the origin and move to the left. When I look at my y values, they're all negative as well. Everyone's real negative in quadrant 3. So negative y values tell me that I need to move down. So I'm going to call this point C. And I'm going to say point C lives at negative 4, negative 2. So again, when I see that negative 4, that tells me I need to start at my origin, and I'm going to move to the left 4 spaces. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Then from that x coordinate, since it's negative 2, I'm going to move down 2 spaces. So 1, 2. I'm going to put a dot on there. I'm going to call it C. And then last but not least, let's move to quadrant number 4. So when I look at quadrant number 4, starting with my x values, I have nothing but positive x's, which again tells me that I need to move to the right from the origin. But I still have nothing but negative y values, which tells me I'm going to move down from my x coordinate. So let's finish this out with point D. And I'm going to say that point D is at the location 4, negative 4. So that positive 4, that x coordinate, tells me I'm going to start at the origin and move to the right 4 spaces. And then from that x coordinate, I'm going to move down 4 spaces because of the negative 4 in my y value. So I'm going to put a dot there. I'm going to label it D. So I'm going to cover all of our quadrants here, and let's kind of talk about a few things. So let's say that I told you that you had the point, let me make something up here, negative 5, 2. I'll put that right here, negative 5, 2. And if I asked you, what quadrant is this in? So I have a negative 5, which means I'm moving to the left, and then a positive 2, which means I'm moving up. So by moving to the right, or excuse me, that's the left. I know my directions. To the left and then up, that would put me here in quadrant 2. Let's do another one. Let's say this time you have the ordered pair of negative 1, negative 3. So negative 1, negative 3. So that negative x tells you to move to the left. That negative y tells you to move down. So by moving to the left, moving down, that would put you in quadrant number 3. Let's do another one. Let's say now you have the ordered pair 0, -3. So I have this point 0, -3. So that's 0 in the x coordinate. Well, 0 is not positive, so I can't move to the right. 0 is not negative, so I can't move to the left. So that 0 says don't move to the right or the left at all. You stay exactly where you are at the origin. But that -3 still tells me to move down on my y-axis. So all the way down here to -3. And we'll call this point K. So when I look at point K, it's not in quadrant 3 because, again, that x coordinate of 0, it's not negative. And it's not in quadrant 4 because, again, the x coordinate of 0, it's not positive. It's not in a quadrant. So point K does not exist inside of a quadrant. Instead, it's living on the y-axis. So it is possible for points to not have a home inside of a quadrant if they're living on one of the axes. So it would be the same thing if, here, we'll label this as it's living on the y-axis. And then one more example. Let's say that I said our point was 5, 0. 5, 0. So that positive x coordinate tells me to move to the right, but that 0 in the y coordinate, again, it's not positive, so I can't move up. It's not negative, so I can't move down. So I just hang out here at +5, and we'll call this point G. So point G, it's not living in coordinate 1, or excuse me, in quadrant 1, and it's not living in quadrant 4. It doesn't have a quadrant home. It's living on the x-axis.